Throughout the first and the second seasons, we get a lot of hints that I believe tell us that Fromland itself is in fact alive. This is something that I've been thinking for a very long time, ever since the first season, and one of the biggest clues for me is something that was mentioned in the first season by Victor himself, and that is that the trees are moving. This right here is a very big clue to what I'm talking about. The fact that the trees in Fromland are moving by themselves might be an indicator that Fromland is a living organism. And if you think I'm talking out of my ass, in the last episode of season 1, what did the boy in white say? What did he say?
Nathan was right about this place. It's angry now. You have to get inside.
And that for me was the smoking gun. Ever since I had the boy in white describing this land that they're in the way that he did, it was obvious to me that Fromland was alive. And the implication of this scene was that the storm that was overwhelming Boyd and Sarah, the same one that took out the radio and the crops, along with the bus coming in and the Matthews house collapsing, all of that happened as punishments that were sent by Fromland. And that's not all. There's also another scene in the first season that really blew me away the first time I ever saw it. And that is when Boyd and Sarah were camping out in the woods. Something moved their entire tent for what seemed like a few minutes, and back then the giant spider theory was the main reasoning for what happened in that moment. But at this point, because we haven't seen the spiders yet, it's obvious to me that what happened was the trees were the ones that were moving, because Fromland itself didn't want them to leave. And that might be how the entire loop works. When people get close to leaving Fromland, it changes the scenery, it changes the landscape, it changes the geography, so that you end up looping back into the town. It's also possible that Fromland itself wanted to direct Boyd and Sarah to the lighthouse. That's, of course, another possibility, but something I think is going to be a major plot point in the future goes back to when Victor says that there's never been a moment when the peaches stopped coming into Fromland. This, along with the fact that throughout the second season, it's repeatedly mentioned by multiple characters that the trees are changing color, and that's something that has never ever happened before in Fromland, leads me to believe that Fromland itself is dying, or that Fromland is somehow sick. The fact that the weather is changing for the first time in 40 years since Victor arrived in Fromland, that cannot be a coincidence. It cannot be a random thing. It's a direct correlation to the events currently happening in the show. Whether it's because of Boyd or someone else, who knows? But reality is, it definitely means something big is happening in this town. Christy talked about a ball of magic fire in the second season, and how this ball of magic fire is what enables humans to be able to live, that ball being the sun. And I think this flame in the lighthouse is the sun for the people in Fromland. It can't be coincidence that one episode after Christy mentioned the ball of magic fire was when we saw the flame in the lighthouse. We've been getting hints ever since season 1 that there are supposedly much worse monsters living out in the woods, and that really makes you wonder, what if the town is actually the best place to be in Fromland? And whether or not there's magic around the town prevents these supposedly even worse monsters from reaching the townspeople. Martin said that he used to think the town was the worst part, but he had no idea what was waiting for him. Whether Martin was even real is debatable, but considering the worst monsters thing is mentioned by multiple characters throughout the seasons, it'll probably end up meaning something by the end of the series. I also believe this flame is what calls people to come into Fromland, or is used for that purpose by other entities like, of course, the boy in white and maybe the other entities as well. But I think Fromland has an ancient purpose it's been trying to fulfill, but it needs someone else to do it. This is why Ethan keeps saying that they are here to complete a specific quest. And Father Katri also talked about that possibility that they were called here to do something, to do a mission that they don't know about just yet. I also want to put out the possibility that Fromland might just be part of a much bigger world that we haven't seen yet, and it has a limitation to its purpose. It's kind of interesting that we didn't see a single monster once the two of them went beyond where Boyd found the talismans. That may imply there's a limited range of effect that all these entities can use their magic on. So the lighthouse might be the boundary for the Fromland entity. Lots of people have been theorizing that Tabitha just went to a different place in this world of From rather than the real world. I've been thinking about what role the boy in white plays in all of these events, and I think the reason why he's become so active in the duration of the show, but he completely disappeared for most of Victor's 40 years in Fromland, is because he's becoming really desperate. He knows that whatever is keeping Fromland alive is running out. Whether that's magic or something else, I don't know, but he's becoming as active as he is right now because he wants to prevent Fromland from dying. Alternatively, Fromland is actually keeping him from getting out, so he wants to kill it. And I think that will be represented by the fire in the lighthouse. Once that fire burns out, Fromland will die. And perhaps the purpose of Fromland all along was to keep some great evil in check, and Boyd and the others will be unknowingly manipulated into extinguishing that flame, which they'll realize was a huge mistake. Because if this flame is what's keeping the town relatively safe, and maybe even the reason why the monsters don't walk during daytime, it could be a total disaster if they extinguish the flame. But yeah, season 3, there's definitely gonna be a lot of interesting things going on. We still don't know what happens to people who die outside of the lighthouse but still inside Fromland. I'm very curious. The people who Abby shot, for example, what happened to them? Or people like Father Cartry, I wonder what happens to them, because we saw what happened to Tabitha. She wound up in a different place. I'll just say that. So many questions.